Welcome back to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And in this case, we're honored to be talking about the American Red Cross, the Mid-South chapter. We're joined by Dr. Sarah Breazeale. She's the executive director of the American Red Cross of the Mid-South chapter. How are you doing?
I'm great. Just, trying to stay warm in this cold weather. But thank you so much for having us today.
Absolutely. You all do a tremendous amount to power the good. We'll talk all about that, but let's start out with a little bit of history and some context. So give us some history for the American Red Cross and then tie that into the efforts here locally.
Yes, definitely. So most people, right, have heard of the American Red Cross. We're a national organization, about 600 chapter locations throughout the nation. And obviously, we're working together with other Red Crosses throughout the whole entire world, right? So we're a pretty large organization, but really, we're doing a lot of work and a lot of good in our own community here in the Mid-South. In the Mid-South chapter, that's a broad term these days, it seems like, but we cover 10 counties, and 7 of those are in Tennessee, on, of course, the west side of Tennessee. And we have 1 in Arkansas and 2 in Mississippi. So a large service area, servicing about 1 million population size.
Let's go ahead and dive into all you do. It is a lot. And so how do you start to paint the picture of the different areas of focus? Give us a little bit of kind of the broad overview, and then we'll dive in deeper.
For sure. So it is a lot, right? But we have essentially 3 main service lines. We have blood services, which people either love, I don't get a lot of smiles when I see the blood mobile pulling up, coming to take that blood, but it does a lot of good. So we have blood services, and we also have training services, which most people think of as CPR, first aid, AED, that sort of water safety initiatives, that sort of thing. And then we also have our humanitarian side, which is disaster preparedness, disaster recovery, service to the armed forces, and our international work.
And I think the humanitarian side is where most people probably see and recognize your efforts in terms of kind of the branding and that piece of it, because that is a huge piece of it. But as you mentioned, there's so much more. Let's go ahead and take them in threads. When you talk about the blood donations, the blood drives, talk about why that's so important for especially the Mid-South.
Yes. So, as a nation, the American Red Cross supplies about 40% of the nation's blood supply. That equates to about 66 blood drives here a year on average, right? Every Tuesday, we have a blood drive at our Mid-South chapter. We're located off of Madison near Cleveland, and those are open to the community. And then on Mondays and Wednesdays, we have blood drives in the community, whether that's at a local church or a high school. We kind of rotate locations. And blood, as you know, is a critical need, and it continues, and only 3% of the population actually chooses to give blood. So if you think about, if we could just bring that up to 6-8%, we'd be in a much better place for those individuals that need blood. Do you want to talk about sickle cell? Sickle cell disease, it's one of those some people have heard of, some people have never heard of. While it's not a new disease, it's a relatively new kind of talking point, right? And so sickle cell disease, it essentially takes your red blood cells that are supposed to be soft and round and turns them hard and crescent shaped, the shape of a sickle. And because of the firmness and the shape of those red blood cells, blood has a difficult time flowing through your body, which can cause anemia, organ and tissue damage, even strokes. It is a very, very painful disease, and is actually the most common genetic blood disorder in the U.S. And it affects majority African Americans. So when we're talking about sickle cell and what folks can do, right, they can simply give blood. Just roll up your sleeve and give blood, because those individuals with sickle cell need multiple blood transfusions a year, often 100 units of blood a year, in order just to manage the disease. It's not to treat it, right? There is no treatment, but that's just to manage it. And what we have found is that 1 in 3 African Americans are actually a match for individuals with sickle cell disease. Why? And that's why it's so important to give blood, because you never know who you may help, whose life you may save, whose pain you may help. And it's such an easy thing that takes just a little bit of time.
Yeah, and I think that, just like you're talking about, that's a life-saving opportunity. And so when you talk about giving blood, donating blood, you literally are saving the lives of our neighbors. And, I think when you look at Memphis being a trauma center and that piece of it, and then the sickle cell, just like you're talking about, there's extreme need. And so there's extreme opportunity for people to plug in and help power the good. So talk about, you mentioned the blood drives and the opportunities. What are a few things that people need to know in terms of just, best practices when it comes to donating blood?
Yes, yes. So what I would recommend for everybody, right? If you go to redcross.org/blood, you can find everything you need to know about eligibility. Most people are eligible, even if they assume they're not eligible. But it's a really simple questionnaire you can complete and just see if you are eligible to give blood. I will tell you this. So go online, complete that questionnaire, sign up to give blood. The whole process takes less than an hour from the time you show up to complete some paperwork, give blood, and you leave, right? So it's a very simple process. And the thing I love about it, Jeremy, is that, for those individuals that want to give back, but say they cannot afford to give back financially, this is even more powerful, in my opinion, right? Because it's something that you can give without having to give of your financial means. So yeah, every Tuesday from 10 to 3, we often have spots. They typically fill up the week before or so. But if you look 2 weeks out, it can easily fit you in, and again, takes about an hour of your time.
Let's switch over and talk about the training, as you alluded to. And so I think it is one of those for football fans who saw Damar Hamlin and how compression, the CPR ultimately was a huge part of saving his life. I think there's so many storylines around everyday citizens being able to be trained and equipped for emergencies. Talk about the training.
Yes, yes. Very true, because that story obviously is near and dear to all of us as we saw it kind of play out on national television, right? But at the American Red Cross, we offer training from CPR, AD, first aid, to even lifeguard training, swimming and water safety lesson trainings, babysitting and childcare, CNA trainings, and much more. Pretty much, if you want to get trained on something, we probably offer it, you know. And just last year, we taught about 7,500 people different community life-saving skills just throughout the year. So you can also go online and learn about hands-only CPR, because that is something that you don't need an official training to get trained on, right? You can just go online and watch a video and understand how hands-only CPR works. And that is actually the recommended method for just your everyday bystander, because it is so easy to execute and will literally save somebody's life, right? So that's a really easy way to, if you want to increase your knowledge and make our community safer, go get that done.
Absolutely. Where do we go to make sure that we are in the loop on the trainings and the opportunities? And so when you look at kind of a calendar year and saying, okay, these are the things I really want to learn, I want to plug in, where do we go to make sure we're in the loop on those?
Yes. So if you go to redcross.org and click on trainings, you will find you can filter down by community, right? So just put in the Mid-South, whether it's Memphis or Dyersburg, put in your location and you can find the trainings near you. Also, for those individuals that, you may have an organization, you might get your entire organization trained, we can do that as well. There's a little contact us here button, and it will send you straight to an individual that can help you get that scheduled.
Awesome. Let's switch over now and talk about the humanitarian. And so all the humanitarian efforts. There's a lot there. So when you talk about disaster response and, volunteers plugging in big ways, there's so much there. So go ahead and start unpacking the humanitarian efforts.
Yes, yes. So most people, right, are familiar with the American Red Cross from being involved in a large scale disaster. Take Hurricane Ian down in Florida, right? Obviously, we are responding in those situations, whether it's in Florida or California, wherever it may be, there's a response. And most of the time in those large scale disasters, we actually have individuals from our chapter, mostly volunteers, that go and respond to those as well. Just as a side note, we're a mostly volunteer-led organization. About 90% of our workforce are actually volunteers. So we couldn't do it without them, that's for sure. So most people think about those large disasters. What most people don't realize is that here in the Mid-South, we are responding to an average of 3 fires a day. And that's mostly here in Memphis. We account for majority of fires in the Mid-South. We are actually the fourth highest city with fires in the nation, right?
Wow.
So that's right behind Atlanta and Chicago, LA. So we have a large number of fires. And what I have found is that individuals that have not been impacted personally by fires, they don't typically understand the amount of fires that we do have. So when we talk about disasters and the humanitarian side of work we do, we definitely have to remember that here locally, our community members are navigating recovery in disasters every single day.
Give us an illustration when the team shows up to respond to a fire. For example, give us an idea of what that looks like in terms of showing up on the scene and then obviously carrying that forward with the support resources. So what does that look like?
Yes, definitely, definitely. So I'll start a little bit further back than that. So we typically get the call from the fire department when they are on scene, saying that there's a fire, and whether that's at a individual house or maybe an apartment complex, right? Which are very different scenarios. But we get the call from the fire department that they're on scene and they need your support. So then from that angle, we gather up a team, typically 2 to 3 individuals, again, mostly volunteers, who come to our chapter building and gather the supplies they need, the recovery kits, water, snacks, everything we need, and then report out to that fire. We typically try to get to fires like when they're still active, right? Because that's at the time of impact when people need us the most. So we get there as a team on scene, immediately just trying to see what the immediate needs are, right? How can we be of most help today? So if a home is uninhabitable, which most of the time it is, right? Then we do have a financial aid component of this. We are giving families, depending on family size, it starts at $515 of this like immediate cash, but it's really a debit card, right? Debit card in hand to say, we recognize that you're going to have immediate needs, and we want you to use this for whatever you deem is appropriate. So if it's one house that's affected, we will recommend, if possible, that they stay with family or friend, because then that money that we give them goes a lot further, right? Because you're not paying for a hotel room, which that may get you 3 nights, 4 nights, right, in a hotel. So we have that component, which is that meeting that immediate financial need. And then we also offer a slew of other resources, and really that those resources come from within the community. Right? We give them essentially a voucher that allows them to go shopping at the local Goodwill or Salvation Army. It says that they've been affected by a disaster. We give them resources about food banks. We give them resources about other places to get clothing, furniture, on and on. I mean, if you can think about, what a need may be, it's probably on our like 6-page list that we have. But then further than that, right? Once the fire has happened and we've made that initial contact and we've given that initial financial aid, we actually have caseworkers that follow up with that family and check on their physical needs, their emotional needs, their mental needs, how they navigating the systems. Because as we know, it's not always not easy to navigate all the different community resources. They're great resources, but it's not always easy to navigate them, right? So we have individuals that follow up with them throughout about 3 months or longer if needed, but to make sure that on the road to recovery, they have the support they need.
Yeah. Touch on working with the armed services. So your support when it comes to serving the armed services, the armed forces, give us a little bit of detail there.
Yes. So you may see us, right, as an organization, and again, mostly volunteers. You may see us at VA hospitals or at yellow ribbon events. And yellow ribbon events are those events where right before our military goes to deploy, they're actually required to go to, it's a 1 to 2 day long event where they learn about all the different resources for them and their family while they are deployed. So we're typically there, right, talking about what we can offer for them. Or you may see us at, just different kind of active military or veteran events around the area. One of the awesome things that exists, which I didn't realize until I started working here, right, is that we are the only organization that can send emergency communications to military members if there's an emergency back home, right? So imagine a military member is stationed in South Korea, for example, right? And they have a family member who's here in the Mid-South, and there is an emergency at home. Mom, dad, sister, brother is sick or maybe has passed away. They actually communicate that message through the Red Cross. We validate, verify that information is true and accurate. We send that through to the proper channels and it reaches that military member. And then we work with that military member to get them home. So that's one of the, just pull at your heartstring, things that we do. It's really an amazing, I'm just really fortunate to be able to do this sort of work and be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can the community help your efforts?
So there's lots of different ways, right? You can give blood, right? Provide that life-saving blood. You can sign up to volunteer. We have volunteers in disasters that are responding to fires. We have volunteers that are supporting our armed forces. We have lots of opportunities to volunteer. So you can volunteer. You can also just spread the local word about what we're doing, right? Most people see the name as like a big national organization, but they don't realize that we are right here in the local community helping our neighbors. Just being an ambassador and an advocate for what we're doing would help a lot.
Absolutely. So wrap up, you've mentioned it throughout, but go ahead and mention it again. Website, where do we go to make sure we're in the loop on all these opportunities to get involved, to serve, to donate blood, to volunteer, donate financially too? Where do we go?
Yes, go to redcross.org. And from there, you can navigate pretty much everything we do. You can also find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, American Red Cross, the Tennessee region.
Well, Dr. Sarah Breazeale, thank you for all you and your amazing team do. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.